One autumn day in Toronto, Canada, two men met by chance in a small roadside cafe. The first was Ethan, a successful but seemingly ordinary software engineer who few knew was hiding anything. The second was Lucas, a free-spirited photographer with bright eyes who always sought out the interesting things in life. The meeting started with a simple story. The two happened to share a table in a crowded cafe. Ethan was reading a book about technology, while Lucas was intently reviewing photos from a recent trip. A random question from Lucas about the book Ethan was reading opened the door to a lively conversation. They quickly realized that they had a lot in common. They both loved to explore, had exciting adventures, and shared a strong curiosity about the world around them. They exchanged phone numbers and decided to meet again to share more interests. One evening in late 2003, Michael Bridges, 22, sat quietly among the raucous crowd at a professional hockey arena in Calgary, Canada. The atmosphere was a far cry from what he had experienced in Brandon, the small town where he grew up. The bright lights on the ice, the constant cheers from the spectators, and the powerful collisions between the players on the ice created a breathtaking atmosphere. For Michael, this was more than just a game. It was a dream he never thought he would have the chance to fulfill. Brandon was more than 700 miles from Calgary, and Michael's journey here had not been easy. The past year had been filled with hardships. His temporary job barely covered his meals. His longtime girlfriend left him, leaving a void he had yet to fill. His old friends had gone their separate ways, leaving him even more alone. During the long, sleepless nights, Michael often wondered if his life could change, or if he would be stuck in this vicious cycle forever. But then, as if by fate, he entered a contest that he had little hope for. A moment of improvisation in filling out the contest form brought an unexpected result, an all-expenses-paid trip to Calgary to watch the hockey game he had always dreamed of. Michael saw this as a sign, a small ray of light in a series of dark days. He told himself that, even if it was just for one night, he would enjoy it to the fullest. A fateful encounter. Just as Michael was about to order a beer to enjoy, a strange man approached and sat down next to him. The man had a sturdy build, an impressive mustache, and bright eyes that sparkled with confidence. He extended his hand, smiling warmly. "Hey, man! I can't believe I'm actually here. I just won this ticket in a sweepstakes." Michael laughed. "What a coincidence!" "Me too. That's unexpected, right?" In just a few minutes, they were chatting like old friends. The man introduced himself as Brock, who worked in construction but had a great passion for hockey. Michael felt comfortable talking to Brock, a feeling he hadn't felt in a year. His life seemed to lack meaningful encounters like this. When the game ended with a resounding cheer, Brock turned to Michael, his eyes shining. "Hey, do you want to keep having fun? I know a great strip club nearby." Michael, still immersed in the excitement, replied immediately, "Why not? Let's go." An unforgettable night. The two of them left the stadium, immersing themselves in the vibrant atmosphere of Calgary. The city at night was dazzling with neon lights, bars were packed, and music was echoing everywhere. Michael felt a new energy flood into his soul, as if all his daily worries were left behind. The strip club Brock took Michael to was a glamorous place he had never thought he would enter before. As they walked through the door, dim lights and loud music surrounded them. But what surprised Michael most was Brock's generosity. Brock pulled out large wads of cash, left generous tips for the staff, and paid for all the drinks without hesitation. Michael, in his financial straits, was surprised by the extravagance, but He couldn't deny that he was enjoying a night he would remember forever. At the bar, they continued their conversation. Michael shared about the difficulties he was facing and thanked Brock for making the evening special. When Michael mentioned Brandon, Brock stopped, put down his drink, and stared at Michael. "Wait! Brandon? I'm moving there for work." Michael couldn't believe his ears. "Really? What a coincidence." Brock laughed. "Life is amazing, right? Hey, if you help me find an apartment when I get there, I'll help you find a job. How about that?" Michael looked into Brock's sincere eyes, then down at the large stack of money in his hand. A feeling of hope flared up in Michael. He reached out and shook Brock's hand, smiling brightly. Deal. Life changed. That night, Michael didn't just have an unforgettable evening. He also found a new light in his life. In the dark days, sometimes a chance encounter can change everything. Michael couldn't be sure what the future held, but he sensed that, for the first time in a long time, his life was turning a new page of hope. In early December 2003, Brandon was wearing a gloomy atmosphere, a light fog spreading everywhere as if to hide what was about to happen. Michael sat in the passenger seat of the car that Brock was driving. The quiet road leading to Michael's house seemed longer than usual. The two had just finished lunch at a small diner near the city center. It was their new habit, a way to maintain the friendship that had grown up from that fateful hockey game. Michael and Brock's friendship began naturally. They met at a hockey game that winter, where Brock, with his natural confidence and strong charisma, made an impression on Michael. When Brock moved to Brandon, Michael was eager to help him find an apartment, and in return, Brock helped Michael find a few jobs with his company. Although the jobs weren't exactly what Michael had expected, most of them involved delivering mysterious packages he accepted, partly because he needed the money, partly because Brock was charming. Michael knew something was wrong. The packages, the condition that they not be opened, and the shady tone in the conversations between Brock and his boss. All were clear signs, but deep down, Michael was drawn to Brock, a free-spirited, confident man with no shortage of money. The image of Brock spending money at a Calgary strip club haunted Michael. He wanted a piece of that life, despite the vague sense of unease. That afternoon, in Brock's car, a sudden phone call shattered the silence. Brock picked up, and after a few short exchanges, Michael realized he was talking to his boss. Brock's tone became serious, and after a few brief replies, he hung up. Without saying anything, Brock turned the car around abruptly, accelerating back in the direction he had come from. Michael sat in silence, confused but not daring to ask. They drove in silence for a few more minutes before Brock pulled up in front of an old motel called Seedy. It was a place Michael had never seen before. Brock hung up, turned to Michael, and said simply, "You stay here." Then he got out of the car, striding briskly toward an old wooden door, leaving Michael in the car with a series of unanswered questions. Michael watched Brock from inside the car, trying to figure out what was going on. Brock knocked loudly, and a few seconds later, the door opened. A woman appeared, clearly surprised to see Brock. Michael saw the tension in her eyes. She backed away, trying to close the door, but Brock quickly held her back. The two began arguing, and although Michael couldn't hear what was being said, he could feel the anger and tension on both sides. Then suddenly, Brock raised his fist and punched the woman straight in the face. Michael froze, unable to believe his eyes. The woman collapsed to the floor, but Brock didn't stop. He lunged at her, continuing to attack with punch after punch. Blood was splattered on her face, and Michael could see the pain on her face even from a distance. Michael sat there, paralyzed, not knowing what to do. Part of him wanted to rush out, to stop Brock, but the other part was paralyzed by fear. He didn't understand what he was witnessing, but he knew for sure that it wasn't something he wanted to be involved in. When Brock finally stood up, his expression was strangely calm. He walked to the car, opened the door, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine without saying a word. They drove in silence, and Michael could feel the heaviness in the air. As the car pulled up in front of Michael's house, Brock turned to look at him. "Don't tell anyone what you saw," he said, his voice cold but menacing. Michael nodded, feeling he had no choice. He got out of the car and quickly walked into the house without looking back. That night, Michael lay awake in bed, the image of the woman with the bloody face playing over and over in his mind. He knew he had gotten too deep into a world he didn't belong in. But now, he also realized that getting out wouldn't be easy. What happened that day had changed everything. He was no longer just a bystander. He was now part of the story, part of the undeniable guilt. Michael's story. About a week later, Michael was sitting in his small apartment when the phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw Brock's name. For a moment, Michael felt his heart beat faster. He didn't want to pick up the phone, but he knew he had no choice. Things between him and Brock had become too complicated for him to back out easily. Memories of the previous week at the motel came flooding back, making him feel confused. But instead of sharing those feelings with anyone, Michael decided to keep it all to himself, trying to maintain a normal appearance as if nothing had happened. He picked up the phone, and Brock's voice was cold and unfriendly. Brock didn't ask Michael how he was doing, but got straight to the point, saying that there was a package to be delivered. Brock asked Michael if he was still committed to the job. Michael felt like he was being pushed into a dead end. Refusing the job would not only put him in danger with Brock, but it would also cost him his only source of income. After a few tense seconds of silence, Michael reluctantly agreed. The fateful dinner. 2 months later, things seemed to be back to normal. Michael continued to work for Brock, making deliveries and maintaining silence. One evening in early February 2004, Michael and Brock met at a small diner in Brandon. Brock always paid, but this time something was different. Brock was not as calm as usual. He was fidgeting, tapping his fingers on the table and looking around nervously. "Are you okay?" Michael asked, breaking the silence. Brock's eyes lit up, and he smiled. "I'm okay. Actually, better than okay," Brock said, his voice filled with excitement. He continued, "I have an offer that I think will change your life." Michael leaned back slightly, listening carefully. Brock said that his boss was impressed with Michael. Not only did he keep things to himself, but he didn't pry or ask any questions about his work. Michael's loyalty and discretion made him stand out in his boss's eyes. So Brock said that his boss wanted to meet with Michael, possibly to consider him for a higher role in the organization, a managerial role, with a higher salary. Michael was both excited and nervous. He longed for financial security, but the thought of meeting his boss, who he knew could be very dangerous, made him uneasy. The final test. Brock continued, "But before you meet him, you need to pass one final test." Michael frowned, not sure what he had just heard. Brock said sternly, "He needs to know that you can do more than just keep quiet and deliver. You need to prove that you can be ruthless and decisive when needed." Michael sat silently, thinking. "What should I do?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Brock laughed coldly. "You have to figure that out for yourself. Prove to me that you can do whatever it takes to protect the interests of the organization." Michael felt the pressure on his shoulders. He knew that giving up was not an option. Brock was watching him, waiting for an answer. The atmosphere in the diner became tense, and Michael knew that his decision now would determine his entire future. Should he continue down this path, or would he find a way out, regardless of the risks? An internal struggle began inside him, and he couldn't help but wonder, have I gone too far to turn back? Michael took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as Brock sat across from him in the luxurious room. The whole situation still felt unreal, like a game Michael never knew he was playing. Standing before him was the man who had guided him all these months, secretly but convincingly, leading him into situations he never expected to be exposed. Michael thought back to the first day he met Brock. It was a particularly difficult day in his life, when everything seemed to be against him. His job was shaky, his personal life was in chaos, and his future was uncertain. Meeting Brock was like finding a life buoy in a stormy ocean. Brock, with his confident demeanor and powerful words, quickly won Michael's trust. He was more than just a guide. He was more like a friend, a mentor, and even an ally in a world where Michael was trying to find his place. What Michael didn't expect, however, was that Brock wasn't who he claimed to be. Everything, from the seemingly important missions to the strange events Michael witnessed, was meticulously orchestrated to push him to the point of no return. Brock did it perfectly, leaving Michael with no doubt about what was going on around him. Over the past months, Michael had faced many different challenges. The sensitive packages he delivered to Brock, the suspicious encounters with people who seemed to have close ties to Brock, all of which created a complex and dangerous picture. Michael was drawn in, step by step, unaware that everything was just a big drama staged to trap him. As Michael told his story to Brock in the hotel room, he had no idea that his words were being recorded. Brock encouraged him to share everything, looking as if he were listening to a fascinating story. But in reality, Brock wasn't just listening, he was gathering evidence. Michael, in blind confidence, confessed everything, from his angry feelings to the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Erin Cheney, 2 years earlier. He detailed every moment of the incident, from strangling her to drowning her in the bathtub, and finally dumping her body in a deserted landfill. As he told the story, Michael thought he was proving himself to be a strong man, willing to do what the organization asked of him. Little did he know that every word he said was a nail in his own coffin. Then there was a knock on the door. Michael looked up, feeling a chill run down his spine. He expected it to be the boss, the one who would have the final say on whether or not he was accepted into the organization. But when Brock opened the door, instead of a powerful man, Michael saw a group of police officers enter. His heart stopped. One of them held handcuffs, and their eyes were fixed on him with determination. "Michael Sanders," one of the officers said, his voice firm. "You are under arrest for murder." Michael was stunned, unable to believe what was happening. He turned to Brock, hoping for an explanation. But Brock just stood there, his expression cold and professional. "I am an undercover cop," Brock said, his voice calm. "Everything you went through was part of the investigation, and you just confessed to your crime." Michael was struck. He tried to defend himself, but he couldn't find the words. Everything suddenly came crashing down around him. He had been living a giant lie for months, and now the truth was revealed. Erin, the girlfriend he had loved, had finally found justice. Her body, discovered a few weeks ago in a landfill, had helped the police piece together the clues that led to Michael. And this drama, orchestrated by Brock and his team, was their way of forcing Michael to confess to the crime he had tried so hard to hide. As he was led away, Michael said nothing. There was only one thought in his mind. His life was over. There was no future, no hope. There were only the cold walls of prison and unrelenting regret. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's episode. Don't forget to share your thoughts on the content in the comments below. We have hundreds of other videos waiting for you to explore right now. If you want a personal recommendation from me on a video worth watching, this is the one I think you'll love. Click and watch now. See you in the next episode.